Hello, poetry lovers. The video tonight shows the creation of a new piece entitled Last Words. This poem is part of my series on infertility and pregnancy loss called Barren Woman. Stick around until the end of the video to see the complete first draft of this new poem. October is Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month, so I'm back after an unexpected hiatus to share a significant piece in this series. This poem was written much more strategically than many of the pieces in this series. I was contemplating the series as a whole and thinking about the potential gaps and needs for the series to be complete. It's a manuscript I've been working on for a very long time, about 6 years, through 1 full-term pregnancy and 6 pregnancy losses. Many of the poems were written before I began this channel, and many of them were written in moments of profound emotion, so there's not a lot of continuity or unity in the manuscript at this point. So I was considering concepts I could write about to fill in some of the gaps that I see in the manuscript, and this poem was conceived through that much more practical stance. Because of that, I had the poem pretty well planned before I began to write. As anyone who has experienced a miscarriage knows, other people often have a very hard time figuring out what to say in response to your grief. That's not an indictment of those people. It's always hard to respond well to grief you can't quite fathom, and I've been very blessed to have a wonderful and supportive community around me as I've walked this path. But outside of that community, I've received some unhelpful comments, and some of them have really stuck with me because they were so hard to work past. That's where this poem came from. For the first several lines of this poem, I limited myself to phrasing the content of comments I've actually received, connected with transitional phrases. The hardest part here was finding wording that was casual enough to suggest the kind of conversation in which these comments usually occur, as well as deciding how exactly to order them. I knew I wanted to work chronologically through the types of comments I received in the years we were struggling with infertility, with one of the most hurtful responses I heard in a place of prominence. So I moved slowly through writing, carefully selecting which statement to focus on next, and then considering and mentally revising multiple possibilities for phrasing before I committed one to the page. I spent the majority of the time writing simply choosing what to say in the lead up to the main point. As I reached the final point, I picked up the pace a little. Here, I turned suddenly from recording the statements to verbalizing my response. Instead of wasting space talking about how receiving these comments made me feel, I let my poem say exactly what I always wanted to say in response, using imperative sentence structure, that is, commands, to show that I was talking directly to the speakers whose words I've just recorded. Previously in the poem, I used a lot of enjambment, allowing the sentences to run over multiple lines to allow the line breaks to highlight words I wanted to stand out. Here, I switched abruptly to using much more punctuation, breaking lines with periods and ending multiple lines with periods. I wanted to make full use of the punctuation to increase the sense of disconnect and discomfort in these lines. I honestly didn't realize how much I wanted and needed to give voice to my true feelings in these remembered conversations. I also used some more archaic or unusual phrasing, words like horror and phrases like be still. I wanted to make my response take on a tone of gravity that was lacking in the phrases from earlier in the poem. As I wrapped up, I finally began considering what to call this poem. It's very rare for me to have a title in mind before I begin writing, and this one seemed to present more challenge than usual in making a title because there was no overarching concrete image to draw from. But then this title struck me. I liked the way this title plays on a few idioms, suggesting both the idea of having the last word in a conversation and of the last words one speaks before death. And having been struck with the inspiration for the title, it suddenly occurred to me that this poem might be a really good fit to be the last piece in the collection. I had previously kind of planned that I would end the book on a hopeful note, but that's not the reality of my experience. I finally realized that I will never bear another child, and that it's foolish for me to keep trying. This is something I'm still learning how to live with. While my parenting journey continues with great joy for the 2 children I miraculously brought to life, My fertility journey ended in failure and profound grief. So I think it may be more fitting for the book manuscript to honestly acknowledge that ending, to leave the reader with just this, that the bloody and difficult events and thoughts captured in these poems are the life stories of 6 children, deeply loved, although never met in person. So here it is, the first draft of Last Words, written in about 8 minutes on February 12th, 2023. Last words. There's always time to try again. Then, at least this time insurance covered it, so no worries there. Then, I know how you feel. It took 6 months for our first, so hard. Worst, what do you think God is trying to teach you? Finally, you can always adopt. Enough. Be still. Press fingertips to lips in horror and fall silent. These were my children. These bloody days were their whole lives. Thanks for watching this episode of Ars Poeticat. If you enjoyed watching poetry happen, please like and subscribe. Then go make some art.